let's chat about this first game between Japan and Brazil. In our preview, Lisa, we talked a little bit about what we could see out of this game. We made some predictions. I had a draw. I was incorrect. I believe you went with Japan. You were incorrect.
Yep.
Love to come back. You all know we're getting back into it in 2023. We love to come back on here and talk about how we were incorrect. 1-0 for the scoreline for Brazil. A late goal in this one. But I think we got to talk about the way in which it happened. And I'm really eager to share our thoughts on this game because, again, Lisa, you were there to take in this match in person. And I got a little bit of a different view because it's different when you're watching it live versus watching it remotely. So I enjoyed watching these two teams go head to head. It was pretty evident early on in this game that we were going to see these two teams. It was going to be a try some stuff kind of game.
Oh, yeah.
Interested in trying some attacking stuff in this game. And it didn't leave a lot of room for, defensive evaluation. But I appreciated some of the little bit of back and forth that we saw throughout the 90 minutes of this game.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this was one of the matches that even previewing the entirety of SheBelieves Cup, I was really excited to watch just the different styles of football between both of these sides. And the Japanese style of football is incredibly skilled and incredibly dynamic, and to be able to watch this Japanese team do that against Brazil was very entertaining. And despite Brazil getting the win and 1-0 over this one, and it was a late change and a late win for Brazil, I think Japan moved the ball very well, maybe even better than Brazil. I think their off-ball movement was really impressive to watch. They had a lot of fluidity between their lines. They had a lot of freedom between the players and where they were able to move, checking into the open spaces. And I think at times it opened up a lot of holes in Brazil's defense, which allowed for Japan to get on those quick counterattacks. I mean, that's what we saw in the first half. It was, I think, a lot of Japan at this point heading into the 45-minute mark. It was a couple really good chances by Japan, and Brazil defensively holding on pretty tightly to the way this one played out in the end of it all. I said this to you right before we went live and before we talked about this, because this game I did get to watch in person from the stadium. And in all honesty, I don't watch a lot of games in person. I watch a lot of them on a screen. I call a lot of games on screens and on monitors, and it's very different to watch a game in person. It's just like the vantage point, you're viewing what you get to see. And although this game was very fast-paced and very back and forth, it felt very unorganized and like discombobulated during the run of play, because it wasn't a lot of like fluidity. And I think it was a little bit sloppy on the defensive end for both sides because of how much freedom they gave their opponents, whether it was Brazil or Japan, to quickly transition and quickly move down the field. It was like the midfield had no defense to it, which makes for a pretty fun game to watch, apparently on TV, but in person as like an analytics person looking at this game tactically, I wanted to see a little bit more defense. I wanted to see hard tackles. I wanted to see a little bit more commitment to the build-up play and understanding the tactics of the game and breaking down your opponents and picking them apart. And I just didn't see that throughout this game, especially the first 45. It was just very open back and forth.
I think it's interesting to sort of hear you say that just because of, I guess, just sort of how this game closed out. I guess if you're looking at it in terms of the numbers, it's mostly even in terms of what we saw in terms of like the offensive side of the ball on both sides. Possession was nearly split with Japan at 51% compared to Brazil with 49%. But in terms of shots, it's 13 for Japan, 9 on Brazil, and Brazil kind of the combo breaker there is the attempts on target, with Brazil's 5 attempts on target versus 1 shot on goal for Japan. And watching it remotely, watching it on the stream, getting those different kind of angles. I mean, it had layers of it, like you said, like where there were stretches of time where you're just like, oh, this is kind of entertaining and kind of fun. But on the other side of that, maybe it's, us, we're always desperate for looking at defensive evaluations, that we weren't necessarily seeing that right away in a game like this,
Yeah.
which I think maybe it was pretty telling early on in that second or that first half, where we kind of saw Japan in a little bit of like a fluctuating three back, going up against a Brazil side that was kind of trying to run and gun some things. So the angles, I think, for me, that I was also really interested in looking at is, we've got NWSL season right around the corner. We've been doing a lot of off-season content, a lot of preseason content around that. So I was very interested in getting some of those early preseason looks at some of the Brazilian players who are to NWSL clubs. And I think we got to see more defensive kind of responsibilities in that second half. I'm in agreement with you there. But I thought, Caroline, put in a pretty good
Yeah.
shift. I think she was kind of everywhere. It was really kind of cool to
Was.
see such an attacking minded player like her kind of really put in some coverage in terms of defensive pressing. But I was really excited to see what Adriana could bring, Julia Bianchi for Orlando and the Red Stars now. So I think those were like some little interesting components. I think that were kind of cool to come out of that first half. But I think when it comes to the second half, I think we just chucked everything out the window as soon as we saw Marta like warming up on the sideline, right? It was
Sandra, you have no idea how loud
also,
Exploria Stadium got.
it
First of
came
all,
in loud
anytime
through the
she, like,
screen.
stood up or, like, touched her hair, that place went nuts because that's Marta's home, right? She's been
Yeah.
at Orlando for so long. That's where she plays. That's where she's comfortable. Yeah, Marta is starting to warm up. Many interruption of noise, but I think Brazil changed a lot in the second half for the better. I think Brazil had the better of the second half between the two, and it has very little to do with the scoreline. I think that I mean, at the start of the second half, Brazil, they moved Dabinha from an out wider spot centrally, and they put her more in the middle of the pitch, which allowed her to receive the ball a lot more and have a lot more possession on top of it, which in turn allowed for Brazil to keep the ball much more and keep it higher up the pitch, not just have this really fast-paced running gun offensive strike that they tried to have in the first half any chance they could, because Dabinha just allows for much more of that fluidity for the team. So I really like that tactical switch of putting Dabinha centrally, which we don't always see her like that centrally higher, that high
Yeah.
up the pitch. I really liked it. Hey, Matt Potter at KC, take notes? I don't know,
Watching the games, maybe?
you watching Matt Potter? I liked it. It was really good to see, and then, of course, as you just said, Marta being substituted into this match, and 4 minutes later, Brazil's on the board. Marta touches it, like, 10 times, and there's already a
Not
goal.
even.
I know.
It took 4
4
minutes
minutes.
from her subbing into the game. I think she had 3 total touches. It took her
Mhm.
3 touches in this game to make an impact,
Yeah,
delivering this assist as Dabinia slotted it away. And it just sort of felt, I think at this point, you're talking about an opening goal coming after like 70 plus minutes of play.
mhm,
And if you're talking about a goal coming that late in the game, it might feel like, okay, well, that's the one. That's the one that's going to determine things in this game, especially when we're looking at Japan and their attempts on target, so few, right? But that's what it sort of felt like. And you could just sort of see the emotion of that moment as well. Like, just obviously the crowd contributing to that,
for
but
sure.
see what it meant to a player like Marta, who had been absent for so long, and a player like Dabinia, who's been also playing with her for a long time. It's sort of having this game close out 1-0 with Brazil picking up all 3 points. I think it's set up an interesting scenario overall for
Agree.
SheBelieves Cup, as we knew that the United States versus Canada was going to happen next, because it's a round robin tournament. There's only going to be 3 games for each of the teams. So if you've got Brazil with all 3 points in first place now, what is that going to mean for the 2 teams competing later on that day?